You're still watching the AM show now. Yesterday, the Attorney General's office justified the decision to prosecute NDC National Chairman Samuel Ofosu-Ampofo. Deputy AG Joseph Penkar insists all Ghanaians are subject to the country's laws and must be dealt with once they breach them. Mr. Ampofo and NDC Deputy Director of Communications Kweku Boahene were on Tuesday arraigned on charges including conspiracy to commit crime. Their lawyers say the AG is abusing her prosecutorial powers. Court correspondent Joseph Akablay has the rest of the story, and we have a conversation on the back of this. Did he run the comment?
I don't see the reason why this matter should even come to the court in the first place. For me, it is as if the CID have no work to do.
I share the same because look at what happened at SYZ recently about Ousubempa. Ousubempa should have called by now.
Top NDC members, including flag bearer John Dramani Mahama and many supporters, were at the law court complex to support Mr. Ampofo, who is facing charges of conspiracy to cause harm and 2 counts of assault of a public officer. The NDC's Deputy Communications Director Kweku Boahene is also facing a charge of conspiracy to cause harm. The two pleaded not guilty, with their lawyers making an application for bail. Justice Samuel Osiedu granted them bail to the tune of 100,000 cedis with one surety. Lawyers for the two, however, say the AG is abusing their prosecutorial powers. Eddie Jutamaklo represents Mr. Boahene.
A little search, a little investigation will show Kweku Boahene was nowhere at the NDC headquarters. So how in God's name would you proceed on the basis of this faulty assumption, proceed to processing for courts? I do not understand it. And I want to beg the learned Attorney General that some of this fusojarism should stop. It is a very noble office of the Attorney General. I mean, how in God's name do you bring a citizen of this republic, prefer criminal charges against him, when a little investigation would have demonstrated to you?
It is just political intimidation. I am not sure it will end anywhere, because they themselves were not confident about the charges they were talking about. So we think that this is intimidation, but this is the beginning of the fall of Nana Akufo-Addo's government.
The AG's office disagrees.
But it's not for them at this stage, for them to have premature ejaculation. So we are not actually going to discuss the merits of the matter, but we are assuring you that we made a judgment, and that judgment was based on looking at the entire facts and circumstances of the matter before arriving at the charges that we have preferred against the accused persons. And we are confident of the fact that we will be able to provide evidence to back the charges that we have actually leveled against. If the national chairman of the ruling party commits an offense, he ought to be tried. Simplicity. No one is above the law. And the Constitution itself is very clear on this matter, that none of us is above the law. Okay? And so any person who falls foul of the law is made to face the law. If at the end of the day, the court finds you guilty or acquits you, that's the decision of the court.
The court has directed the AG to furnish the accused persons with evidence to be used against them in the course of the trial. They are to reappear on May 6.
Well, that's Joseph Akablay, our court correspondent, and he is live in the studio. There are many other things that went down in the courtroom and outside the court that he'll fill us in. Joseph, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mavi.
Let's start from why we're here with this case. Let's go a little back into this leak tape. What is the chairman allegedly, what is he alleged to have said on this tape?
So the tape went viral in the month of February. In that audio, he saying a number of things. Key amongst them includes telling the party communicators that they need to, verbally attack the chairman of the Peace Council. And he saying that for the first time he's going to endorse such insult on such individuals, even though it's not something that he has done in the past. He also talks about the need for the party to do something about what had happened at Ayawaso West Wagon. And reference was made to some security operatives who have been accused of visiting violence on members of the opposition NDC during that election. So it is in that stretch of the audio that the talk is made about possible kidnapping, amongst others. And since the tape went viral, the chairman denied the tape. He said he's not the one on the tape. The party communicator also said the tape was doctored. Later on, if you recall, when the former president who joined him at the court spoke at the Perez Dome, he did say, try to, I beg your pardon, explain portions of the tape, talking about why the chairman had concerns about the Peace Council chairman's failure to condemn the Ayawaso West Wagon violence, but going a step further to rather immediately ask that if the former president had said boot for boot, like we heard him say, then he should apologize for that. So Mr. Mahama was explaining that is what caused the chairman to say what he said. And if he said that, it doesn't mean that he should beat up the Peace Council chairman. He was simply saying that he should criticize him. And so there were talks about how do you reconcile that with the claims that the tape was doctored and the tape wasn't the voice of Mr. Ofosu Ampofo. But the police CID stepped in, they invited him over. He failed to show up initially. They had to reschedule, and eventually he went over to the police CID where they took a statement from him, and they subsequently forwarded the docket to the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General they arrived at the conclusion that this is a case that they should prosecute. So in terms of the journey so far, this is how far we've come.
You know, when this issue first came up, we talked about how, we've seen doctored tapes in the past. We've seen secret tapes in the past, but it's always been said, it's doctored, it's not me. And we're talking about how this should have gone through a certain process to certify that indeed this is not a doctored tape, this is the voice of the NDC chairman. And when the CID picked it up, a lot of people didn't think we would get this far. Do you know if this recording had been taken to some forensics to listen to it and to determine that indeed this is him?
Interactions with the AG's department, we understand that it's a key aspect of the case. We are told that when Mr. Ofosu Ampofo made it to the CID headquarters the first time, the full audio is about 30 minutes. And so we are told that the entire 30 minutes was played to him. After the 30 minutes had elapsed, they asked him whether that was his voice, and he said he was not going to comment on that. So that was his response to them. But we understand that the police prosecutors have taken the pain to try and do some verification in itself, and which will be forming a key aspect of this particular case that will be put in before the courts. But we know that, as we've heard from the defense lawyers time and again, is that the audio is doctored in their opinion. So they've said two things. The first is that it's not a voice, and the second is that it's doctored, which presupposes that it appears someone may have done something to it to create a certain impact or to create a certain mischievous purpose. That's for which is going to be the main issue of contention once the matter comes up in court, in terms of the evidence that the state will be leading on the response from the defense team as well.
But they were allowed to plead yesterday, right?
Yes. In fact, Mr. Ampofo was charged with conspiracy to cause harm, and Kweku Boahen was charged with just that. But Mr. Ampofo had an additional count, 2 counts of assault of a public officer, and they both pleaded not guilty to the charges leveled against them. In fact, their lawyers stated categorically that in their opinion, they don't think this is a case that ought to be brought to the court in the first place, because they believe that the AG has the discretion to decide which cases to prosecute, and they don't think that she exercised the discretion in the right manner. And that was the point that Tony later made when he had the opportunity to make opening remarks. And
So Tony Lita is the lead lawyer for the two?
Mr. Ampofo is representing just Mr. Ampofo. And for Kweku Boahen has Dr. Abdul Basit Bamba. And Tony Lita, is the former president's lawyer in the election petition case. And for those who may not know Dr. Abdul Basit Bamba, he was the lawyer who filed that case against the construction of the National Cathedral. And so these two are quite known figures in the space. Dr. Dominic Ayine is also on the legal team for Samuel Ofosu Ampofo, and you also have Edwidge Tamaklo also being on the legal team for Kweku Boahen. So in terms of their opening statements, Dr. Bamba in his view made a point that he thinks that at the end of this particular trial, compensation will come the way of his clients, because they have been wrongfully dragged to the court as citizens who are going about doing their duties, and then they don't see why they should be brought to court in the first place. An interesting dimension is coming from that angle too. The AG had stated categorically that on the 3rd of February, that was the day that the meeting took place at the NDC's headquarters. Now, the defense lawyers are saying that on that 3rd February, Mr. Boyne was in the Ashanti region, and not at the NDC's national headquarters as has been claimed. So we are told that that will be the argument that they will be advancing in this particular matter. Tony Lath has also hinted that he has some initial objections by way of legal points that he intends to raise. We are not clear what direction that will be, but he says that once he makes that application, and it could affect the substance of the case, and may even end up causing the case to be dismissed entirely even before the trial proper starts. And
so it means that we may not even go into the matter
depending
itself.
on how the court agrees, whether the court agrees with him or not. So he had said that, but Justice Samuel Siedu had said that he thinks that he should file an appropriate motion, serve the Attorney General's office, and once they come in, they will fix a date and have the arguments and counter-arguments, and the court will decide what to do with that.
General Mosquito, the General Secretary of the NDC, also in that voice that we heard, he said they were not sure about the charges. Like, do you know why he said that? Did something in particular happen in court that seemed like they were not sure of the charges?
So when the hearing started, I mean, the Attorney General, after the lawyers had introduced themselves, she stood up and made some corrections. Unfortunately, she didn't read them, so we don't know whether the corrections relate directly to the charges, but there were some corrections that were made about 2 sentences on the charge sheet. And when she asked to amend them, Attorney Later didn't oppose that motion or that request, even though he said that he did not have a copy of the charge sheet, so that made it a bit difficult for him to decide whether or not to oppose it or not. But the AG responded that the changes she was effecting relate to the facts, and because she's here to present them, that's why they don't have copies. But once she does that, she will give them some. But if they want to see it before they allow her to make those changes, she's ready to give them a copy. And right at the courtroom, she handed them copies. They took a look at it and they felt that it's not something that was substantive enough. So that is the sense I get from the General Secretary in terms of what he's referring to that may have caused that. But there's also another part that a lot of the times in criminal cases, when the prosecution presents the case, they make reference to a complainant, someone who has raised issues with something. So in the case of the trial of Dr. Opuni, the complainant in that case was Cocoa Board. We are told that Cocoa Board contacted Yoko and informed them of some contracts that they feel that should be investigated. In this particular matter, the agent presenting the facts of the case at no point did not make any reference to any complainant. She simply said that an MP had passed on, there was a by-election, it was marred by violence. Then on the 3rd of February, a meeting takes place at the NDC's headquarters. So the NDC General Secretary and even some of the defense lawyers have raised issues about that, about the fact that where is the complainant in this particular matter? If you are charging someone with assault, they are asking questions that who has been assaulted? Has that person walked up to complain? Because again, the AG says there was a threat that the EC chairperson will be molested. So they ask again that has the EC chairperson complained to you? That is not mentioned, and those are some of the issues that they are raising about this particular process. Again, they make the point that this is a misdemeanor, and in their opinion, Dr. Bamba said that it could have even been handled at a district court, but they find it interesting that it has been brought all the way to the High Court. But it was at that point that the Attorney General comes in to say that it's not in the place of any lawyer to determine which court hears the case. And Dr. Bamba said he thinks it was a fair point for him to make, and that is why he was making that point.
Yeah, but it's interesting. We saw the AG herself and her deputy on this matter. Is it unusual?
It's not unusual, at least with the high-profile cases. And the trend that we've seen is that mostly on day one of the high-profile cases, you have the Attorney General and Deputy Joseph Memka and a team of state attorneys, chief state attorneys and senior state attorneys accompanying them. We saw it in the case against former top officials of the National Communications Authority. On day one, the AG herself went for some 2-3 days into the trial. She was still present, but eventually when the legwork starts, when the trial proper starts, the AG and the deputy never go. It's
but this is one that we thought, or at least I thought, the AG herself was going to handle. That was the impression we were given.
Yes, and so she presented the facts, and she made the initial arguments in court and everything. But we've seen a practice. She does that initially because when the trial proper starts, in fact, in the NCA case, when they have to call the witnesses, when they have to lead the witnesses to give evidence, it is that at that stage that mostly we tend to see the state prosecutors take over and lead the witnesses to give testimony, and subsequently during cross-examination if need be. So in terms of the appearance and the legal team on day one from the Attorney General's office, is the trend that we've seen with this particular Attorney General since she took over. She shows up always on day one to ensure that the charges are read and she presents the facts. Then subsequently, the state attorneys continue from there.
Okay. And I don't have any intentions of putting you on the spot, but I would want us to talk about the charges specifically. There's conspiracy to cause harm, there's causing harm, and assault on a public officer. But is it trial proper that's going to begin May 6th? What is going to happen? So
if they're able to deal with the outstanding issues, and one thing that became quite clear with the Republic versus Eugene Bafo-Boni case, that's the case against former top officials of the National Communications Authority. That was when the Supreme Court pronounced by unanimous decision that you need to give documents to accused persons before the trial starts. And so the Attorney General had expressed willingness to do that even before Tony later made an application. So if they're able to submit all those documents to them before May 6th, because it's quite a length of a time. So if they're able to submit all those documents to them and give everything to them, and there are no concerns on the part of the defense lawyers, and they're able to deal with the initial objections that Tony later wants to raise, then it could mean that the trial proper could start on May 6th. And if it's going to start, then it means that the state has to call its witnesses to testify. But if those issues about documents and the bit about the initial objections are not able to deal with them before May 6th, then it means that May 6th would have to be the date for them to settle all those issues before the trial starts.
Okay. It's also crucial or critical. Is it critical? I'm not sure. There's that dialogue also ongoing. At least we've seen the first meeting that the National Peace Council is mediating. And some persons have talked about the impacts that would have. Do we still, for instance, expect the NDC to cooperate with that dialogue, for instance, because the chairman of Osuampofo is very involved in that? In
fact, the context is that, in the month of February, it was shortly after the president had asked the two parties to begin a dialogue, and that this whole issue of the tape came out. And it was during that period that, if you recall, the chairman was also writing a series of letters to the presidency to try and get some modalities decided upon as to how they are going to meet. Yesterday, it came up on PM Express. Victor Adawudu, a member of the NDC's legal team, said that, obviously, they would have preferred that this should not be happening, but they will continue to submit to that process because they believe that is a key step towards ending political party violence. So they are going to submit to it. But they are unhappy about the fact that Mr. Ampofo is being prosecuted because, in their opinion, they feel that this is not a case that should be brought in the first place. But the Attorney General's office say that, no one is above the law, like we heard the Deputy AG say. So if they feel that a crime has been committed, they're going to put up the case. And if the court determines whichever way it goes, they accept it that way.
Okay. Now let's get on to the phone line and speak to Mr. Chris Akome. He's a private legal practitioner. I thought we would get some education on the specific charges here. Mr. Akome, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning to you and to your listeners.
So the charge of assaults, or let's deal with the harm first. Causing harm, and this is just purely by way of education. What must be proven?
Thank you. Criminal prosecution is a very serious matter because it involves the liberty of the individual, and you must ensure that no doubt, all doubts are sorted out, and that any doubt in the matter must be resolved in favor of the accused person. What I'm trying to say is that there are ingredients which constitute a crime in criminal prosecution. And all those ingredients must be proved in order to, constitute a crime against an accused person. And if the ingredients are not proved, the charge cannot be sustained. And in criminal prosecution, one expects the prosecutor to ensure that all these ingredients which constitute a crime must be in place, or there must be evidence, in relation to them. Like you rightly stated, when you are charging somebody for causing harm or a crime or an assault, there must be an evidence that the person you are charging has inflicted some assault on the person. The person has been attacked at a place and at a time witnessed by others, and that kind of thing, to sustain that kind of charge against the person. Because it's not just to say that you want to send somebody to court for one reason or the other, but the person might have done something. Something must be done, and it is that action of the person from which the charge will flow. And then the facts of the case will show that the person has done this, or is in the process of doing this, or has completed doing this. And for which action you are charging the person for causing the harm or that sort. In this case, I am particularly worried that a whole AG's office and not the police will go on this journey.
But Mr. Kume, do you know what the CID found? Because they carried out the investigations. And so if we're here today, then it means that they have something substantive.
I think I had the privilege to appear before them during the initial stages of the investigation. And all that they can produce is the purported tape, which, the first accused claim has been doctored. And if that is the tape they are going to rely on, then there are a lot of things which are wrong with that tape. Because in the
so why don't you just sit back and enjoy it, because you know that in the end they will not succeed?
They are wasting everybody's time, and then you are bringing the institution of the Attorney General into disrepute. Making fun of that kind of institution, as if the people there don't know what to do. Is that the way you want us to go? A matter like this, which should not have even started at the High Court, was taken to the High Court because the misdemeanor and the jurisdiction or the venue is wrong. It was challenged in court yesterday. And then, a criminal matter sent to a commercial court. Even if I think your reporters were there with a charge sheet which had errors on it. Had to be amended in court.
Is that unusual, Mr. Akume?
Come again.
Is that unusual, amending or making changes in courts?
Oh, my sister, not in a high-profile case like this. You come to court for a whole Attorney General to tell the whole world that there are mistakes in the charge sheet and that kind of thing.
So the point is the fact that it is not unusual, but you just think that because it's a high-profile case, then they shouldn't have made mistakes in the first place.
Even typographical and everything. And secondly, the accused persons or their solicitors were not even served with the charge sheet. And the demand was made to it in open court. It's also embarrassing that, such a case in which the Attorney General herself represented the state, this kind of,
but you didn't raise any serious objections, did you? At least your team.
Very, very serious objections were raised with the jurisdiction, and then even the lead counsel for the first accused, intimated the court about the way the case will be going, because they will be raising a preliminary legal objection in the first place.
Okay, but I thought the issue of the jurisdiction was settled.
For the father, if the reliance on the success of this case is going to be based on the tape, then it is flawed right from the beginning, because there are decided cases which frowns against recording.
But right now, Mr. Akume, are you not going ahead of yourself? Because we are still not clear if there are any persons behind the charges, if people made complaints in the first place? Do we know?
You see, if complaints are made, investigations must be made to sustain the seriousness of the complaint as to whether the complaints can, a check can be formed on the complaint. In the first place, there is not even any complainant, as it is normally the case in criminal matters.
Was it clear, Mr. Akume? Was that issue very clear yesterday that there were no specific complainants?
It was raised by the second defendant solicitor that we have a situation here which is abnormal because in a criminal case, somebody must suffer a harm. Somebody must suffer an assault. And there was no complainant in this case. Even from the first of the case, what was read was that, an attempt was made or, they were incited at the meeting to molest the NDC chairperson and then the chairman of the Peace Council. That is all that has been said.
Okay, Mr. Akume, did the AG address that specific issue in terms of whether or not there were complainants?
It was not addressed.
Okay.
It would not have been addressed because there was no complainant and there will not be any.
Okay, but now you're being emphatic, that you are 100% sure that there are no complainants, so this is unusual.
You see, the other interesting thing, as indicated yesterday by, Tony Lita, was that, you see, on the day that the said offense was created, or said to be created, the second accused, we are talking about conspiracy. One or two people must meet, and they were said to have met at the party office to, engage in the act of conspiracy to commit these offenses. And the second accused was not in Accra that day. So Mr. Lita intimated court that the issue of alibi would be raised because if he was in Kumasi and evidence was that he was in Kumasi throughout, how could he have been, in Accra to sit with the first accused and others to conspire?
All right.
For the issue of alibi, yesterday,
Mr. Akume, I guess
the hopelessness of the case was laid very bare by the two solicitors.
Okay.
So let's wait and see whether it was not just found that Attorney General wanted to have in court or just to waste the time of the, to engage, the executive of the National Democratic Party in frivolity.
Okay. We'll see what happens, Mr. Chris Akume, but thank you so much for your time this morning. He's a private legal practitioner, also a member of the NDC, Mr. Chris Akume there. And I thought initially when we started the conversation that we're just going to get the elements of the specific charges of assault, causing harm, and conspiracy to cause harm. But he wanted to get into the matter itself because he's a part of their legal team. Yeah. So he's also saying essentially the things that you've mentioned to us, that they've got some initial objections to many of the things which will be raised.
Yes, they intend to file a motion and the court to fix a date to hopefully deal with that before the May 6th date.
Okay. All right. So any other on the back of this court case? Yesterday we saw a lot of high-profile NDC members in court and the former
president himself. Yes, the minority leader Haruna Idrisu was there. Former Chief of Staff Julius Debra and Nana Todadze were also present. And I must say that this has been, we've seen this happen with a number of the political cases.
Yeah.
But should I tell you what will happen subsequently?
Most of these people we've seen or we saw yesterday would not be coming to court.
Yeah, after 2 or 3 hearings, they'll stop coming.
They will be tired. Yeah. Is it that they will be tired, or it's just
trials are quite stressful.
Yeah.
And that is why the lawyers, when you hear them, they constantly say that. If my client hasn't done anything, why have you brought the person to court? Because it drags. The former top NCA officials have been prosecuted for more than a year now. Opuni has been in court for more than a year now. And what it means is that if they're called to be sitting 3 times in a week, every single day, 3 times in a week, you have to be present in the court. It can go at 9 a.m., the case may be called at 10:30 or 11, and it can sometimes be heard from 11 all the way to 4 p.m., and you have to be there all throughout. And that is when you see the numbers dwindling and dwindling, and eventually you'll be left with the two individuals who are in the box.
But this particular case was called rather very early.
Yes, well, in fact, it was the first case that was called by the judge. So it appears the judge is paying some close attention to this one.
Do we know if Justice Samuel Esiedu, I'm correct, right?
Yes.
Is he assigned specifically to this case?
So he's the cases. He's responsible for the Commercial Court 1, and this case has been assigned to him. He was the same judge who dealt with the GFA matter during the initial stages when the Attorney General's office wanted an injunction, and later on when they were even made attempts to liquidate the GFA, it was his court that was hearing this particular matter. Okay. He has been through the process from a district court and been promoted to the High Court.
All right. Trust Joseph Akablay to bring us more as and when new things happen on, I was going to say on the floor of Parliament, but no, not quite, in court. Stay with us. You're watching the AM show.
Securities industry. And our enabling act is the Securities Industry Act 2016, Act 929. It defines securities if you